You're listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast, hosted by Zach Bechtold and Matt Franks. If you'd like to learn more about the Bearded Theologians, you can go online at beardedtheologians.com, where we have past podcasts, blogs, and a couple items for sale. So check us out, beardedtheologians.com. Thank you for listening, and enjoy this week's show. You're listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast, hosted by Matt Franks
and Zach Bechtold, and we have a longtime friend of the podcast and just friend and colleague of Matt and I's. Been on the podcast before, but now in a new way. We have Mike Ratliff, who is the lead catalyst. And I'm just going to leave it at that because that's perfect. Easily the best title of anybody that we've had on the show. So, Mike, thanks for being with us. And why don't you remind our listeners a little bit about yourself, you know, who you are, where you're from, and then we'll jump into what you do.
Thanks a lot, Zach. It's good to be with you. I have served for the last 12 and a half years as the Associate General Secretary of the Division on Ministries with Young People at the Discipleship Ministries of the United Methodist Church. And so as I moved to a new place in life, I wanted a much simpler title. and so I adopted the idea of lead catalyst. And my goal in that move was to do several things. One is to work with the church. One is to be able to do what I'm passionate about and care about, and be able to focus on that with maybe not quite as much administrative restraint as sometimes happens in the general part of the church. Mm-hmm. And so I'm doing a number of different things, and some of those things are ongoing, and some of those have been more a one-time thing. I had a great opportunity right at the beginning of the year to spend basically 24 hours with the Conference Youth Council of the Rio, Texas conference down in San Antonio. And we had just come back from Denver where it was about 10 degrees, and got to go down to San Antonio. So beyond the opportunity to be with those young people on that council to talk about leadership, I also got to enjoy some warm weather. So that was nice. In addition to that, I'm doing several things. And so one of those things that I'd like to talk about a little bit today is called Discovery, or Discovery Weekend. And so this year I'm doing some contract work with the Upper Room, and specifically in the program area that works with young people's ministries. And so Discovery is an event, if you're familiar with Emmaus and familiar with Chrysalis, there's some things about Discovery that would look familiar. There was a pastor who a number of years back really wanted something to happen for their middle schoolers, because Chrysalis was happening for high schoolers, and it was such a good experience for them that this pastor wanted to find a way to give middle schoolers that kind of spiritual growth experience. Mm-hmm. But knowing that middle schoolers might not be ready to all go off into a retreat center and be with a lot of people from a lot of different churches, Discovery is designed to happen in a local church. Probably one of the things I love most about Discovery, the reason I got involved in Discovery is when we moved to Nashville, we went to a church that did Discovery Weekend, and so they were in need of people to spend the night on the church floor, and I had lots of experience with that from my years of youth ministry in the local church, and so I volunteered, and I was amazed at the fact that in this fairly medium-sized church, we had about a dozen middle schoolers who were a part of Discovery Weekend, but we had high schoolers. High schoolers give the talks, and they also lead what's called D groups, or disciple groups, and then they also involve other adults in a lot of different roles. From everything from leading sessions to cooking meals and serving meals, and families who host high schoolers at their house at night, that sort of thing. And so for this dozen middle schoolers, there were probably 75 or 80 people from the congregation who were involved in that. And I'm a big proponent of youth ministry that is integrated into the overall ministry of the church. And I think Discovery may do that better than any other ministry that I've seen that tries to do that. And so I love Discovery. It takes a lot of work actually to put it together initially, but there are churches, I think there are upwards of 160, 170 churches in the country that they currently do Discovery. And so my opportunity over the next year is to work with a group of people who are big cheerleaders for Discovery and who have been invested in it to encourage more people to be involved in it. And so looking forward to not only meeting those folks in churches where they're currently doing Discovery, but also helping other churches find ways to make Discovery a part of the ministry that they're doing. So that's kind of what I'm up to about that. I don't know if you have questions that will help me do a better job of communicating what it's about, but I'm sure you have some questions, so I'll give you that opportunity.
Sure. I'm not sure if I have a question more than a reflection of just, I mean, we worked with you in young people's ministries and things like that on various projects and events, and have a ton of years of experience in youth ministry. And the thing that I have found across the country, just everywhere that I've been and served, junior high kids, that kind of 5th to 6th grade to 8th grade age group of kids is almost always left out. They have to wait until they get into high school, or they have to wait until they get into this or that, or, there's not, I've seen CCYM groups and conference groups and district groups just leave them out. They're not old enough. They've got to be a freshman in high school.
Right.
So this is my first time about hearing Discovery. And so to know that there is a program that starts local, right, and steps them into something like a Chrysalis or an Emmaus is really encouraging and helpful, because it goes back to my years in youth ministry, is that 6th, 7th, 8th grade year when kids are trying to figure out who they are. Life is just awkward and hard, and it's just all up in the air. To have something that is local and grounded and familiar is so important, and that's for them,
Right.
That easily steps them into the next phases of their lives, in ministry and just space in the church. Because so often right out of children's ministry into youth group, there's not space, it's just hard. And so that's encouraging for me to know that there are good folks out there like you doing the work to say, hey, no, we have this and it's good. We need more of it.
Well, it's a great weekend for the middle schoolers, because it does say to them, the church cares about me.
Right.
I've been to so many youth worker conferences where the middle schoolers are actually kind of the butt of the jokes, and ministry with middle schoolers is like the low rung on the ladder.
Right.
And actually, I have always loved middle schoolers. As a matter of fact, I tell people that middle schoolers and college age have a lot in common. Middle schoolers, high schoolers, a lot of times want to give you the answer they think you want because they want you to like them.
Yep.
Middle schoolers don't care.
That's right.
They really are. They want to say what they think, and they'll ask the questions just because they don't know. College age, they'll say what they think because they think they know more than you.
That's right.
So the motivation's different, but in a lot of ways, I think college ministry and middle school ministry are a lot the same, and I love both of them. But beyond that, high schoolers have this great opportunity for leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And so as they're developing their talks, as they're planning and getting ready, and then leading those small groups with the middle schoolers in them, they have this opportunity to grow. And not only that, but also build relationships with these middle schoolers. So when those middle schoolers go to high school, there's some high schoolers that they know. And so I think that's one of the really cool aspects of Discovery, in addition to the adults that get to know the middle schoolers
Mm-hmm.
by name. And
Right.
so it doesn't end with the weekend. The next Sunday at church, they've heard more of those middle schoolers' stories,
Mm-hmm.
and they connect with them and ask them about what's going on. And I've always said that a really healthy church, if you're just standing around between services, or between services in Sunday school or after church, and you hear adults who are able to call youth by name and ask them what's going on in their lives, or
Mm-hmm.
ask them something specific, so that that adult knows something about that young person, that's a really healthy congregation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Discovery really helps make that happen. So that's why, I've really been sold on it ever since that first time that I got to spend the night in the hallway, keeping the guys in their rooms and the girls in their rooms.
Uh-huh.
It's just a great opportunity for growth for everybody who's a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and this is the first time I've heard of it, and it sounds like it'd be a great program for some of our local churches that are involved in those communities. 'Cause, I mean, our church does have some people involved in Emmaus, and they're kind of like all of our programs, trying to figure out how can we attract young people,
Right.
and I think this would be a good bridge to get those kids invested in early, versus trying to get them as middle schoolers, where they're like, by the time they get to high school, they usually have, I always think in youth ministry, by the time they get that car, you're in trouble. If you don't have them like
Right.
fully invested in the program, by the time they get that car, they're, the chances of them being around dwindle.
Mm-hmm.
And so if there's a
Right.
way that they can be invested in, knowing that, like, maybe they started in the program and saw some high school kids giving a talk and thinking, I could do that later. And when I get
Right.
to be a high school, I'll get to do that. And then, when then they get involved in an Emmaus community, to see, like, just the connection that those things have that's just so vital in our churches, that we forget that really the church isn't just about the 1 hour a time Sunday worship, but it's about making those connections. And worship doesn't provide that opportunity, whereas something like Discovery or Emmaus, provides a deep, intimate connection that worship cannot offer. And I think that that's vital for all churches to consider, and how they're involved in those kind of ministries. And so, yeah, thank you for that work,
Mm-hmm.
being able to do that, and helping it,
Well,
bringing that to even our mind was, a big thing.
and your reaction is not unusual.
Right.
I think the word just really hasn't gotten out there beyond the areas where Discovery started. And so this pastor who actually started Discovery came to the Upper Room and said, actually they came to me when I was still at Discipleship Ministries, and said, this really should be a part of the ministry of the Upper Room, because it's about spiritual formation with middle schoolers, and it's growing larger. It's too large for me, and at the same time, it's not growing enough.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and they're right. We talk all the time about revitalization of churches. Something like Discovery is a great tool for revitalizing your church with a focus on youth. So I'm pretty sold on it, and am excited that I get the opportunity to not only be a cheerleader for it, but also find some ways to help Discovery spread.
Mm-hmm. I think the big value that I see in it is like you said, you identified that junior high kids, middle school kids are very similar to college kids and young adults. They're willing to ask the questions, they're willing to search and willing to do those things. And they have that very similar place in the church where they're not there. They're not welcome there. They're just, it's a strange world that they live in, and a strange space in the church we could create for them. But when you do something like this and people begin to hear those stories, they begin to connect on those levels, from junior high kids to the oldest people in your congregation. You begin to bridge that gap. And like you said, healthy churches, it's more about knowing who the person is down the hall or right beside you, than saying, hey, quit running in the sanctuary, or quit doing this, or quit doing that. There's that relationship there that I hope we begin to see to break down the walls that we have in our churches and the gaps that we have in our churches with youth and young adults, because of this work, because we're intentionally putting people together and in ministry together and in relationship together, whether they're 12 and 13 or 80 or 90 years old or 50 years old, whatever the age gap is, right? We begin to connect them in ways that are more than just, they sit in the back of the church over here, we sit over here, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I dig that. That's really, really, really exciting. Is there a way that we, Matt and I, can help other than just getting the word out here and
for
pointing people in your direction?
For sure, getting the word out, I think, is really helpful. And if people want to learn more about it, it's just discovery.upperroom.org. Really easy to remember. Or if you just Google Discovery Weekend, that'll show up. And I think, at least my hope is, that in the next few months there are going to be some broadening opportunities for high schoolers as it relates to discovery, and for the middle schoolers who are involved in discovery. And so hopefully we'll get to do another opportunity to talk about new pieces that are coming together, that can help churches with their young people and their spiritual growth.
Yeah, I think so. And just the more that we can communicate what's out there, the resources, the events, the functions, the things that I just, everywhere I've been working with youth and young adults in this country and within our denomination, it's what's out there, what's out there.
Right.
And, it's no different than today of Matt and I haven't heard of this. And so it's a great thing to soak in and be like, okay, here's another tool and another resource that we can help promote and get the word out on. So I bring into our own churches.
Yeah, I think it's just a great tool. It sounds like it would be phenomenal for something like we're trying to do to bridge the gap within our. We have cluster groups in our districts, and so I think this would be something great for our cluster group, because we have a couple of youth ministries in our cluster group that don't have things that they can do to develop spiritual practices, and this might be something good that we might look at in the near future. And just having a website to direct people to go to. And it doesn't sound like something I made up. That's like, that's always a good thing. Because I mean, there are a lot of times in youth ministry work that, a lot of the great programs do come from word of mouth, and how people get connected in is through word of mouth. I mean, that's how I got connected to Global Young People's Convocation, was word of mouth. And I really enjoyed being able to be connected to that. And those are those things I think that the more we can provide those opportunities for people to see and to hear about, the more chances that they can experience that, and it can shape and change people's lives. I think that that's important for the work that we do for the kingdom.
Yeah. And, I think it's also a possibility there are some places where there are 3 or 4 smaller churches that come together and do that together. And so not only do those youth get to know each other and get to experience discovery, but those adults who work together have that same kind of experience. And, one of the purposes of the meeting that I'm a part of downstairs is looking at how Chrysalis and Emmaus communities can be more connected to discovery. Because the people who are leaders in those communities, they have the experience of leading those weekend spiritual renewal experiences. And I also think it's a great way to bridge some of what's going on in our denomination right now. The theology comes from the upper room, and so we know that that's solid. It's consistent with the theology that has informed people's faith formation for years and years and years. And there are people who are readers of the daily devotional that comes from the upper room, that have contributed money to help Discovery launch. And so there are a lot of people who have invested in this to make a difference, and that investment, I think, goes beyond differences that we might have about other things, because I've never gone into a situation where people have said, no, we are not going to join hands with somebody else in order to help young people learn about God.
Right. Right.
Or help young people have a relationship with Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't happen. And so this is a great place where even if we disagree on other things, we should be able to bridge those disagreements in order to make a difference in the lives of our young people. At least I hope so.
And what a better place to model it, right? So often our youth model it to us of, here's what community looks like. Here's what God's love and grace looks like for all people. Here's what it looks like to disagree with somebody, but still be in community with them. What a better place for adults to bring that back home and say, no, we're gonna show and help and put those things aside and be in community with you and try to help you learn those skills, and rather than you teaching us about it. That's so important. And like I said, I love that our youth teach us that, but it would be nice if we as adults could model that as well.
Wouldn't that be a good thing?
Wouldn't that be amazing?
It would be amazing. And there are a lot of people who do, thank goodness.
There are.
Yeah.
But it's that honesty that comes from our youth that is so helpful and can be vital in our congregations and communities. So it's good. I dig it. Yeah. You always have an open invitation to come.
Well, you guys are awesome. I appreciate the invitation, and appreciate you guys and what you're doing, and the way that you use your voices and your access to be able to share a lot of different opportunities, possibilities in ministry. So thanks.
No, thank you. You're truly the one to blame for this.
And actually,
maybe it was the weather.
Maybe it was the weather.
You could definitely add, co-inspire of Bearded Theologians to your long list of things.
I'll take it.
And so
I catalyzed that.
That's right. You were lead catalyst here as well.
That's right. Yeah, I just didn't know it at the time.
Neither did we, and it's been perfect.
Cool.
So we thank you for your time, Mike. And so for the Bearded Theologians, I'm Matt Franks.
I'm Zach Bechtold. Thanks for checking us out. Thank you for listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share on all social media outlets. You can check out old episodes and more information at beardedtheologians.com. Thanks for checking us out.